In my previous life, I was pushed off the rooftop of the school building by the daughter of the richest man, Emily Smith, and died from the bullying. It was ruled as an accidental fall. Reborn, just as Emily Smith was about to bully me again, I became her, and she became me. Chapter 1. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in high school. At that moment, I was being shoved towards the restroom by Emily Smith's minions. Seeing Emily Smith in her delicate dress leading the way, I instinctively stopped in my tracks. What's going on? Wasn't I pushed off the rooftop by Emily Smith and died? In a flash, I realized I had been reborn. In that brief moment of hesitation, one of Emily Smith's minions gave me a hard shove, her face full of displeasure. What are you dawdling for? Do you want to eat yesterday's dirty socks again? I was pushed off balance and almost fell to the ground. Just as I steadied myself, a slap landed on my face. The lead minion spoke harshly. Answer me, are you mute? My cheek quickly swelled up, burning with pain. Seeing us stop, Emily Smith turned around, clearly dissatisfied. Stop wasting time, just drag her. With Emily Smith's command, several girls dragged me towards the restroom, just like in my previous life. Chapter 2. In my previous life, every time the bell rang for recess or the end of the school day, my nightmare began. As soon as the bell rang, regardless of whether the teacher was present, Emily Smith and her gang would find various ways to torment me. Being beaten, having dead rats thrown on my desk, being dragged to the restroom to have my clothes stripped off and filmed, having dirty socks stuffed in my mouth, these were all routine. I had tried to resist, but it only led to more severe beatings. I even called the police, but under the pressure of Emily Smith's wealthy family, no classmates or teachers dared to testify for me, and it was ultimately dismissed. As for the reason I was bullied, Emily Smith claimed it was because I had dirtied her beloved sneakers. At first, I thought I had accidentally stepped on her shoes without noticing and sincerely apologized, even saving up to buy her a new pair. But that was just a cover. Through prolonged bullying, I learned the real reason. After I transferred to this school, I took the first place that she had always held. Such a proud person like her couldn't accept being ranked behind someone she considered inferior. After failing to surpass me in the third monthly exam, she began to bully me relentlessly. Eventually, I was pushed off the rooftop and died with resentment. But my death meant nothing to them, like the death of an ant. They continued to live their glamorous and carefree lives. Chapter 3. We soon reached the restroom. Emily Smith tilted her chin towards the restroom, and one of the minions immediately understood, walking towards the stall with a grin. Emily, I've been holding this in for a long time, it's going to be good. The minions laughed together. Jenna, you're in for a treat. Yeah, don't forget us when you make it big. Emily Smith sneered. She won't amount to anything, not even fit to carry my shoes. As the person in the stall came out, the two girls holding me immediately dragged me into the stall. The unflushed yellow liquid in the toilet was particularly conspicuous, with a few spits floating on top. The familiar scene was repeating itself, unchanged by my rebirth. I clenched my fists tightly. The pain of my broken bones from falling off the rooftop in my previous life seemed to envelop me again. I had drunk their waste before, but now that I had been given a second chance, should I still let them control me? The unwillingness before my death echoed in my mind, refusing to fade. To hell with it, I thought. If worse comes to worst, we'll both go down. This was my final thought. I broke free from the two girls holding me, rushed to Emily Smith, and grabbed her hair, slamming her head against the wall. Emily Smith, pampered and delicate, was no match for my strength, and she couldn't break free in a short time. I screamed at her. Why do you privileged people get to trample on others' lives? Why? Bang, bang, bang. Again and again, I vented my anger. Emily Smith's minions were stunned by my actions. What are you all standing there for? Pull her off me. With Emily Smith's scream, they finally reacted, hurriedly pulling us apart. Emily Smith's hair was a mess, and blood was flowing from her head down her face. It was the first time I had seen Emily Smith so disheveled, and I couldn't help but laugh. Seeing her reflection in the restroom mirror, Emily Smith became furious. She gritted her teeth and pointed at me. "Hold this girl down, I'm going to smash her head in. You worthless piece of trash, how dare you lay a hand on me?" The minions were efficient, and despite my desperate struggle, I couldn't break free. A sense of powerlessness washed over me again, just like before my death. I asked, "Emily Smith, aren't you afraid of karma?" She looked at me disdainfully. "I've never been afraid of karma. You should worry about yourself first." As she spoke, she grabbed my head and slammed it against the wall. Just as I was seeing stars and feeling dizzy, I saw myself being held by Emily Smith's minions, and in my hands was my head. As I stopped moving, the minions asked in confusion, "Emily, aren't you going to keep smashing?" Looking at the beautifully manicured nails on my hands, I was shocked. I had switched bodies with Emily Smith. I released Jenna's hair, turned to the mirror, and wiped the blood off my face. Imitating Emily Smith's usual tone, I slowly said, "Stop. Drag her to the unflushed toilet and give her a good time." Emily Smith screamed and struggled. "What are you doing? I'm Emily Smith. Let me go." "Jenna, what kind of witchcraft did you use? Switch us back. Once I switch back, none of you will." Glug, glug. The restroom finally fell silent, except for the occasional whimper from Emily Smith. Although it was strange to see Emily Smith being bullied in my body, I felt more satisfaction. From head to toe, I felt a sense of relief. "Emily Smith, you never expected this, did you?" But I still didn't understand why we switched bodies. Would we switch back? Ding, ding, ding. As the class bell rang, I sent all the minions back to the classroom. Once they were gone, I took out my phone and crouched down to ask Emily Smith, who was lying in the corner of the restroom, "What's your phone password?" Emily Smith glared at me with anger. "You'll never get anything from me. What kind of witchcraft did you use? Switch us back." Seeing that Emily Smith still didn't understand the situation, I kicked her in the stomach, just as she used to do to me. "You need to understand the situation. Now, I am Emily Smith. You better cooperate. Otherwise, there will be no more Jenna in this world." After getting the password, I ignored Emily Smith, who was still wiping off the filth, and walked back to the classroom. When I arrived a bit later, the homeroom teacher was pointing at Jenna and scolding her. "Jenna, do you know what time it is? Why bother coming to class? It's almost over. Do you have any respect for me as a teacher?" Sitting at my desk, resting my chin on my hand, I found the scene amusing. The homeroom teacher, who didn't dare offend the rich kids in the class, only vented her anger on ordinary students, would never imagine that the person she was scolding was actually the rich kid she couldn't afford to offend Emily Smith. "You just wait." Emily Smith, who had never been so humiliated in her life, whispered through gritted teeth as she passed by me. Seeing her like this, I chuckled and rubbed my left wrist. "Can't handle it already? This is just the beginning." Chapter 4. After school in the evening, as soon as I got out of the car and returned to the Smith residence, Mr. Lin, the butler, hesitantly called out to me. "Miss, a classmate of yours is here to see you." And she said. I sneered and finished his sentence. "She said I'm an imposter, and she's the real Emily Smith." As soon as I entered the living room, I saw Emily Smith nervously holding Mrs. Smith's hand. "Mom, you have to believe me. I am the real Emily. Dad likes fish, enjoys tea ceremonies, and dislikes bananas. Mom, you love photography and hate daisies." Then, as if remembering something, she excitedly added, "Right, when I was little, I drew a family portrait, but it was chewed up by our dog, and I cried for a long time." Mrs. Smith suddenly understood. "So you're saying you're Emily, and the current Emily is the owner of your body?" Emily Smith nodded frantically. Yes, exactly. Clap, clap, clap." Watching Emily Smith speak nonstop without noticing me, I walked forward clapping and asked, "Then why did we switch bodies?" Seeing me, Emily Smith stood up excitedly. "How would I know? Jenna, how dare you come to my house?" Then, remembering the humiliation in the restroom, she looked at me with a sinister expression. "You dare come here, today you won't leave unscathed. I'll make you wish you were never born." Ignoring her threats, I crossed my arms and smiled at her. Emily Smith, feeling less confident under my gaze, desperately sought validation. She clung to Mrs. Smith's arm and asked, "Right, Mom?" Mrs. Smith subtly pulled her arm away from Emily Smith's grip and sipped her tea. "Emily can handle it however she wants." Emily Smith was overjoyed to hear this. Remembering her experience at school, she glared at me viciously. "Mr. Lin, strip her and throw her out." As Mr. Lin approached me step by step, Emily Smith's smile grew brighter. But soon, her smile froze. Because Mr. Lin had turned around and was now holding Emily Smith's arms behind her back, forcing her to kneel. Emily Smith was stunned by the sudden change. She struggled and said, "Mr. Lin, what are you doing? You've got the wrong person, let me go." I glanced at Emily Smith mockingly, then walked up to Mrs. Smith and imitated Emily Smith's tone. "Mom, why is she so dumb? Stealing my phone is one thing, but thinking she can impersonate me with that poor look." Luckily, I had anticipated Emily Smith's move and called Mrs. Smith earlier, pretending to be upset about Jenna stealing my phone and seeing my diary entries, which was actually a hint to Mrs. Smith. Emily Smith was confused. "What phone? I didn't take anything from Jenna, you're framing me." Mrs. Smith didn't even look at Emily Smith, instead, she smiled at me, pretending to be angry. "Next time, don't write your diary on your phone." I playfully stuck out my tongue at Mrs. Smith and promised, "I won't do it again." Seeing me and Mrs. Smith laughing together, Emily Smith felt extremely wronged. That was supposed to be her place, but now her mom didn't recognize her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke with a sob. "Mom, don't you really recognize me? Mr. Lin, please escort this young lady out." Mrs. Smith's tone was calm, but her eyes held emotions I couldn't understand. Emily Smith tried to explain, but Mr. Lin quickly covered her mouth and dragged her out of the Smith residence. Once everyone had left, Mrs. Smith turned to me and said sternly, "If you make such a mistake again, go to the ancestral hall and kneel." Then, perhaps thinking she had been too harsh, she softened her tone. "This is the last time." I immediately bowed my head and admitted my mistake. "Mom, I understand. I won't do it again. All right, you've had a long day at school, go rest." Fortunately, I had learned a lot about the Smith residence after my death in my previous life. As I was about to leave, Mrs. Smith added, "You can be close to that boy, but you can't marry him, understand? His family has too many problems. As a daughter of the Smith family, you need to marry someone." Recalling Emily Smith's attitude in my previous life, I replied irritably, "I know, someone of equal status." Then I walked back to my room without looking back. The boy Mrs. Smith mentioned was Liam Carter, a prominent figure at our school, known for his excellent grades and appearance. Originally polite and gentle, he became arrogant and rebellious after his parents died in a car accident a year ago. Now, he either hangs out in bars or gets into fights. He was also Emily Smith's childhood friend and secret boyfriend. Emily Smith had liked him since they were kids, but he always kept a polite distance. After his parents' death, Emily Smith stayed by his side, and he was eventually moved and agreed to be with her. But the Smith family didn't approve of Emily Smith marrying someone with such a troubled background, so they kept their relationship secret. Chapter 5. The next day, as soon as I entered the classroom, I saw Emily Smith trying to explain to her friends that she was the real Emily. Emily Smith's best friend, Hannah, hugged my arm affectionately. "Emily, you're finally here. This idiot says she's you. Isn't she delusional? Knowing a few secrets doesn't make her you. Where does she get the nerve? The other two friends laughed so hard they couldn't stand up straight. One of them clutched her stomach. Oh my, I can't take it. Look at her serious face. You! Emily Smith's face turned red with anger, pointing at them but unable to form a complete sentence. I smiled and patted Emily Smith's cheek. Jenna, stop wasting your energy. They all know you stole my phone. Then I signaled to the minions, who immediately understood and dragged Emily Smith to the restroom. The class president, Claire, paused her note-taking and tried to intervene. Is this really necessary? Class is about to start. I was grateful to Claire. She was the only one who had ever stood up for me in my previous life. Although she didn't testify for me when I called the police, I didn't blame her. She had her family's reputation to consider. Thinking of this, I gently said, Class president, this time it's Jenna's fault. Claire thought for a moment and didn't intervene further. For the next few days, I didn't see Emily Smith at school until Hannah's coming-of-age party, where I saw Emily Smith in a high-end dress, her makeup flawless. She was arm in arm with Liam Carter, looking proud as she surveyed the banquet hall, completely different from her previous state. Hannah frowned and approached her. What are you doing here, and with Liam Carter? Liam Carter defended her. Miss Lynn, she's my date. Hannah looked at me, then at Liam Carter, and finally pulled me into a corner, whispering, What's going on with you and Liam? I awkwardly smiled. I broke up with him. He's just trying to get back at me. In reality, Liam didn't believe my story. He and Emily Smith had recognized each other, but luckily Hannah didn't press further, just muttering a few curses. At p.m., as the party was winding down and guests were leaving, Hannah, reluctant to part, asked me to stay the night. I hesitated but eventually agreed. All right, let me inform my family. Hannah, hugging my arm, said, I knew you were the best, Emily. No need to inform them, I've already told your mom. Here, have some warm milk. As the car started, Hannah handed me a bottle of milk and opened one for herself. Chapter 6. Seeing that I took the milk but didn't drink it, Hannah asked, Why aren't you drinking? You used to love it. My stomach feels a bit off today. Suit yourself. Despite my caution, I still fell into their trap. When I woke up again, I was in the school restroom, surrounded by Emily Smith and her gang, who were chattering away. Emily Smith muttered, Why isn't she waking up after a few slaps? Is this drug really that effective? Hannah asked, Can't we just hit her while she's unconscious? Liam Carter immediately rejected the idea. No, if we don't follow the steps correctly, we might not switch back. Emily would suffer for nothing. Hannah snorted but didn't argue further. Did you go to her house? Is it really that shabby? Bored, Hannah started a random conversation. Emily Smith replied with disgust. I wouldn't step foot in that tiny, rundown place. Look at her phone. Her mom remarried when she was little and only recently reconnected with her. After sending her to this school, she stopped caring. Her dad is a gambler who doesn't give her any money. When we switched bodies, I searched everywhere and only found $100. It was disgusting. That's pretty miserable. Hannah said, shocked. Emily Smith sneered. That's what she deserves. Oh, really? Liam Carter said mockingly, biting his cigarette. Emily Smith didn't notice his tone and angrily said, You're smoking again. Liam Carter paused, then lit the cigarette, filling the air with smoke. He mumbled with a smirk, I'll quit next time. Chapter 7. As my eyes fluttered open, Hannah noticed immediately and excitedly shook Emily Smith's arm. Emily, forget about him. Jenna's awake, she's awake. She blinked. Realizing I couldn't pretend any longer, I slowly opened my eyes and asked in confusion, Hannah, why did you tie me up? Untie me now. You can't seriously believe Jenna's lies, can you? Hannah gritted her teeth. Jenna, stop pretending. I know everything. I almost fell for your trick. Enough talking, time is running out. Since she's awake, you guys hold her hand and hit me on this spot 9 times. Then switch and let me hit her. Emily Smith instructed. Liam Carter gently stroked Emily Smith's head. Sorry you have to go through this, babe. Emily Smith closed her eyes, bracing herself. Let's start. I was restrained and couldn't break free. After 9 hits, it was my turn. I struggled to buy time. Don't hit me, don't hit me. I'll tell you how to switch back. Emily, hit her. Don't listen to her, she's scared. Hannah urged. Really, let me go. I really know how to switch back. Emily Smith hesitated for a moment, but just as she decided to proceed, a group of well-trained bodyguards burst into the restroom, pinning her hands behind her back in an instant. Ah, let me go, you've got the wrong person. She screamed, eyes filled with regret. So close, she was so close to succeeding. Due to their family backgrounds, the bodyguards didn't dare touch Hannah and Liam Carter, so they just surrounded them. Emily Smith and her gang didn't bring anyone else, so they were easily subdued. After the bodyguards untied me, I looked at Emily Smith and her friends' constipated expressions and smiled brightly. Give them a good beating, just don't cripple them. Hannah fumed. You wouldn't dare. Do it. Watching them get beaten black and blue, I happily returned to the Smith residence. Showing mercy to your enemies is being cruel to yourself, especially when they want your life. If I hadn't received a mysterious text warning me to be wary of Hannah at the party, I would have fallen into their trap. Fortunately, I trusted most of the information in the text and had the bodyguards set up real-time tracking, with the tracker hidden in my new custom necklace. As soon as I woke up in the restroom, I pressed the necklace's button to send a distress signal. But who was the mysterious person who sent me the text? After thinking for a long time without any suspects, I decided to text and ask directly. Who are you? What's your motive for helping me? The reply came instantly. 5 p.m. tomorrow, Suite 01, Grand Palace Hotel. Chapter 8. The next morning at breakfast, Mrs. Smith asked me sternly. I heard you had a falling out with Hannah. I responded awkwardly. Just a little disagreement. Mrs. Smith snorted. A little disagreement? What happened last night is disgraceful. Control your temper. There are a few cases of Pinot Noir in the cellar. Take them to the Lynn family tonight as an apology. I had just agreed when Mrs. Smith paused and said, with your temper, maybe it's better if Mr. Lynn goes. After all, Hannah did some things wrong too. Sensing something was off with Mrs. Smith's attitude, I quickly asked. By the way, Mom, wasn't the Pinot Noir a gift from Mr. Lynn? Mrs. Smith visibly relaxed at my question and softened her tone. Was it? Then let Mr. Lynn handle it. I breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, I had guessed right, and Mrs. Smith was indeed suspicious. I used the excuse of visiting the Smith family company to avoid my weekend finance and piano lessons. I had only learned a bit of finance and piano at school, and my limited skills would easily give me away. In the afternoon, I dismissed the driver and went to the Grand Palace Hotel alone. When I opened the door to the suite, I was surprised to see who was inside. It's you! The person smiled calmly. Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is whether we can reach an agreement. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of agreement? Miss Jenna, you help me gather evidence of the Smith family's crimes, and I'll keep an eye on Emily Smith's movements to ensure your safety. I countered. But I'm safe now. The person confidently replied. The Smith family is already suspicious of you. It's only a matter of time before your identity is exposed. You're right. I smiled and extended my hand. Pleasure doing business with you. Back at the Smith residence, I searched the study but couldn't find any useful information. The most likely place for confidential documents, the safe, was locked. I remembered the Smith family's safe allowed 3 attempts to enter the code. After 3 wrong attempts, an alarm would sound. In my previous life, Emily Smith had tried to open this safe when she planned to elope with Liam Carter, but even she failed 3 times in a row. How could I possibly know the code? "What are you doing, Emily?" Mrs. Smith's voice startled me, making me jump. I turned to her, clutching my chest in mock annoyance. "Dear Mom, you scared me to death sneaking up on me like that." Mrs. Smith lightly tapped my head with her finger. "You were too engrossed in your thoughts. What were you thinking about while staring at the safe? Thinking about how to steal the household register and elope?" Mrs. Smith's voice rose in surprise. "What did you say?" I laughed and pulled Mrs. Smith out of the study. "Oh, Mom, I was just joking." After pretending to think for a moment, I added, "But if I really did steal the household register and elope, would you be mad?" Mrs. Smith frowned and scolded. "If you dare elope, your father and I will break your legs. Are you still thinking about Liam Carter?" Mrs. Smith then rambled on for a while, but I managed to get through it. After several attempts to gather information, I took out my new phone at a cafe and texted the mysterious person. I could only find a little on the Smith family. "How's your investigation on Lin Shunsheng?" The reply came quickly. "Making progress. Be careful, there's something unusual going on with the Smith family." Just as I was wondering what was unusual, a group of bodyguards surrounded me. "Miss Smith, the master requests your presence." Taking advantage of the bodyguard's momentary distraction, I quickly typed a message asking for help. "Come to the Smith residence and save me." After sending the message, I tried to stall for time. "Who sent you?" The lead bodyguard stepped closer. "Mr. Smith wants you back within an hour. Please don't make this difficult for us." As the bodyguards approached, I frowned and snapped. "Enough, I'll go myself." Just as we were about to leave the cafe, I clung to a pillar in the lobby. Seeing this, the bodyguards tried to pull me away. But they didn't know I wasn't the real Smith family heiress, so they didn't dare use too much force, resulting in a tug of war that kept me in the cafe. I shouted to the cafe staff for help. "Help me, I don't know these people." Hearing this, the onlookers craned their necks to watch. But seeing the burly bodyguards, no one dared speak up. The staff, unfamiliar with such scenes, nervously asked, "Should I call the police?" "Yes, tell them it's an abduction." The lead bodyguard panicked. If he couldn't handle this simple task and it ended up at the police station, he'd lose his job. Ignoring whether I was the real Smith family heiress, he ordered his men to drag me out. Seeing the onlookers ready to intervene, he shouted, "This is the Smith family's eldest daughter, having a spat with her father and refusing to go home. If you interfere, you'll be in big trouble." Hearing this, the crowd quickly made way. There was only one Smith family in the city, and if this was true, offending them could ruin their lives. The staff also quickly hung up the phone, giving me an apologetic look. The Smith family, the wealthiest in the city, was not someone a mere staff member could afford to offend. Resigned, I was escorted into the car. Chapter 9. Back at the Smith residence, Mr. Lin tied me up in the ancestral hall. Inside, Emily Smith leaned against Mrs. Smith's shoulder, looking pitiful as she spoke. Mr. Smith was politely chatting with a man in a green robe. This man must be the Taoist priest they hired to switch our bodies back. Seeing me enter, the priest stood up and dusted off his robe. He walked over and scrutinized my face before saying, "Not a spirit, probably just an accident." Mrs. Smith asked urgently, "Master, how do we fix this?" The priest stroked his beard. "It's simple. Give me their birth dates, and I'll draw a magic circle in the room with the ancestral tablets. Once they stand in the circle, they'll switch back after one incense stick burns. No matter how much they suffer during the process, you must not intervene, understand?" Mr. Smith asked worriedly. Will it be dangerous? Don't worry, it'll just be uncomfortable for a while. Mrs. Smith flattered. With you here, we feel reassured. Mr. Lin, take the master to the main hall. As soon as the priest left, Emily Smith walked up to me and slapped me. Seeing no reaction from me, she got even angrier. She raised her hand for a second slap, but Mrs. Smith stopped her. We're about to switch back. Once we do, you can kill her if you want. Then Mrs. Smith lovingly stroked Emily Smith's cheek. But if you hit her now, you'll be the one in pain later. Emily Smith thought about it and agreed, glaring at me. You'll get what's coming to you. The priest worked quickly, and soon the magic circle was ready. Rows of ancestral tablets were placed on the altar, and a pale yellow circle with intricate symbols replaced the usual kneeling cushion. At first, I felt nothing when pushed into the circle, but soon I felt my life force draining away. My soul seemed to be torn apart, and my whole body felt like it was being shattered. Everything around me blurred, and all sounds disappeared, leaving only a deafening ringing in my ears. I glanced at Emily Smith, who was also collapsed on the ground, clearly in as much pain as I was, before losing consciousness completely. Chapter 10. When I woke up again, I was back in Jenna's body. In the courtyard of the ancestral hall, Emily Smith stood over me with an iron rod. Did you really think you could replace me, Jenna? She stomped on my face, grinding the dirt-covered sole of her shoe into my skin until it was bloody. Emily Smith lifted her foot off my face, laughing maniacally. Ha ha ha, Jenna, no matter how hard you try, you'll always be beneath me. Still glaring at me? Not in enough pain, huh? She swung the rod at my leg. Crack, the bone shattered, sending waves of pain through my leg. Let's see how many hits you can take. Crack, another bone broke. The pain was unbearable, cold sweat pouring from my forehead, my body instinctively curling up. Spit. I spat blood onto Emily Smith's pants. Untie me if you dare. Emily Smith, furious at the blood on her pants, snapped. Let's see how long you can keep that mouth of yours. Just as Emily Smith was about to swing again, two figures silently approached her from behind. In one swift motion, they disarmed and restrained her. Freeze, police. Emily Smith panicked at the sight of the police but quickly regained her composure. So what if you're the police? My dad will get me out. She spoke with false bravado, but when she saw who stepped out from behind the officers, she was stunned. Liam, what are you doing here? Liam Carter knelt beside me, untying me without looking at her. I called the police. Then he asked me apologetically. Sorry I'm late. Are you okay? I smiled weakly. Any later and I'd be meeting the Grim Reaper. Emily Smith screamed in despair. Why? Why are you doing this to me? Do you have some hidden motive? Liam, answer me. Liam Carter coldly replied. Because your father killed my parents. Emily Smith was in disbelief. No way, Dad and Uncle Carter were so close. He wouldn't do that. Impossible. Nothing's impossible. Your father has already been arrested. I smiled and added. You'll be reunited at the police station soon. Chapter 11. How's your leg? Liam Carter's concerned voice came through the phone. Healing well. The doctor said I can be discharged in 2 months. Liam hesitated before asking. What about your parents? Hearing his cautious tone, I chuckled. There's nothing to ask. We cut ties long ago. By the way, has Emily Smith's sentence been decided? Emily Smith was sentenced to less than 10 years for attempted murder. Andrew Smith was sentenced to more than 10 years to life for murder, smuggling, and bribery, with all his assets confiscated. Are you satisfied with this outcome? Liam's deep voice came through the receiver. I mumbled through a mouthful of fruit. It's all right. When she gets out, make sure to collect your debt." Liam laughed softly. "I will." Liam. "Yes? Thank you, and here's to a successful partnership." Chapter 12. Epilogue. My name is Liam Carter. A year ago, I had a happy family. But a car accident changed everything. My parents' car brakes failed, and they died on the way to the hospital, leaving me alone in a big house. Just when I didn't know what to live for, the butler told me my parents' death wasn't an accident, but murder. The culprit was my father's longtime friend, Andrew Smith. Not only did he kill my parents, but he also tried to take over my father's business. He even started sending people to follow me. But I couldn't find any evidence of his crimes. I began to change myself, making him lower his guard while frequently interacting with his daughter, Emily Smith. I knew she had always liked me. I used to ignore her, but now I played along, and she quickly defied her parents to be with me. But after 3 months, I still hadn't found any useful information. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a turning point came. A strange girl stopped me, claiming she was the real Emily Smith. After explaining, I quickly believed her. The arrogance and determination in her eyes were identical to Emily Smith's. That expression was truly disgusting. Emily Smith said her parents didn't recognize her anymore, which was music to my ears. I seized the opportunity to form an alliance with the girl in Emily Smith's body. When Emily Smith and her best friend planned to kidnap Jenna, I knew my chance had come. I sent her a warning text, and she didn't disappoint. Not only did she escape Emily Smith's trap, but she also got her revenge. Though she hit me too hard, leaving me sore for days. The next day, we successfully formed an alliance. She gathered information, and I monitored Emily Smith's movements. One day, Emily Smith mysteriously told me she had a surprise for me, and I knew something was wrong. I quickly warned Jenna to be careful, but it was too late. Seeing Jenna's distress signal, I wanted to save her immediately, but I was still waiting for news from the team investigating Lin Shunsheng. I had to wait. I couldn't let all our efforts go to waste. But as I waited, there was no news from Lin Shunsheng. Just as I was about to give up and rescue Jenna, the news finally came. We had the evidence. I immediately called the police and rushed to the Smith residence. I admit, on the way there, I was worried. Worried that my selfishness had cost Jenna her life. Seeing Jenna relatively unharmed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I made it in time. I never expected the reason Andrew Smith killed my father was because he discovered his smuggling activities. How laughable and tragic. The Smith family father and daughter were imprisoned, Mrs. Smith fell into depression and took her own life, and the company went bankrupt with huge debts. They got what they deserved. I finally avenged my parents. But Liam Carter could never be the bright and sunny person his parents had hoped for.